lot of people who suddenly held their hand up and said, "Oh, I've been there, and I would like to get involved." The next sister city is Poggio in Italy, and that has been our sister city since 1976. It's pretty active. It's not a big city. It's part of a larger region. At one point in time, it was a bigger city with independent schools and what have you. But, as a lot of cities consolidate, but we have a pretty active relationship with them. We are hoping to be able to receive a delegation from Poggio next summer.
Oh, wow.
The last one we had here was in 2018. And they came for 4 or 5 days. They came during the film festival because residents of Poggio had a filming competition. And so it was a wonderful time. Now, I first joined the commission in 2015 on my first term and served for 3 years. And then recently I joined again in 2022. And so I'm on my second term. Now, the next city that's very, very active is the city of Besançon in France. It is on the eastern side, near the Swiss border.
Okay.
Besançon is a city that is very similar to Charlottesville. It has universities. It sits in the mountains. It's an arts, cultural city, very historic city. The city goes back to the Roman Empire. Wow. It was originally named and settled by the Romans and has been in existence ever since. It was a major point of, fortification for Louis XIV. So they had a giant citadel, which still exists on the hill overlooking the city.
Incredible.
And a very incredible location that's naturally defensive. It's a wonderful city. I've been several times, usually in association with Charlottesville High School. We received earlier this year an exchange of about 28 students from Besançon here at Charlottesville High School, and we had activities for them. We also received a delegation from the mayor's office earlier this year. We had an opportunity for citizens in Charlottesville to meet and greet and to get to know people. Now, coming up, the most interesting program is working with the drama teacher at Charlottesville High School. Next April, the drama department at Charlottesville High School is going to take 30 students to Besançon to do 2 performances of a chorus line.
Oh, wow.
And so what we're hoping to be able to do is organize where commissioners and citizens of Charlottesville might also be able to make that trip at that point in time. But we're just getting started on that. But we just got the confirmation this past week that we have the facilities and the halls reserved for us. And so everyone is very, very excited. We've been talking about this for many years. We were talking about it in 2018. Then by the time we got around to talking about it again, the pandemic hit.
Of course, yes.
And of course, which put everything. And so Besançon is probably the city that's most closely connected to Charlottesville in terms of socioeconomic levels. And the mayor of Besançon has been here several times over the years. We have a new mayor there. The city is now more of a socialist city than before, but very interesting is because Mayor Wade just made a trip there. September the 8th was the 80th anniversary of the 3rd Army Infantry Division liberating Besançon. So they celebrated that 80th anniversary. Mayor Wade went to participate in the ceremonies. We had members of the armed forces, members from the embassy. Mayor Wade, he was able to give a lot of speeches, and it was really, really a wonderful occasion. We posted pictures on our Facebook page, but it was a chance to recognize the fact that we've had a connection probably since World War II. For 80 years now, we've had this connection with Besançon.
Yeah.
And of course, the next city is also terribly important, Winneba in Ghana, which is, it's our city for a different reason. When we look at the sizable African American population here, or people who have African roots, descendants from people who originally came from Africa, then having this city in Africa is a wonderful connection. Ghana is also the country from which the majority of the enslaved persons from Africa came to Virginia.
Okay.
So
So there's a Ghana-specific connection even beyond
it is,
the continent.
without a doubt, it's a very important connection. And the Winneba Charlottesville Foundation, that's run by Dave Norris, makes 1 or 2 trips each year to take delegations to Winneba. And it would have been very, very successful and pretty well sold out each time that he organizes those trips. And so we have an active exchange with them. We have an active relationship with them, and we're very, very proud of it. We had the mayor of the city arrive last year, spent a week here at a different culture. I think there was an African-American culture, a festival that week. And so we try to maintain that relationship. Now, the one that's most interesting and new is Huehuetenango in Guatemala. And we intentionally set out to seek a Spanish-speaking city. Mm-hmm. Given the increasing population of native Spanish-speaking people here, or second generation, or even third generation now, after all these years, we realized we did not have Spanish-speaking. Now, recognize the fact that no one city represents the whole Spanish-speaking world.
Right.
We have to always be careful that we don't assume that, okay, if we go to Guatemala, then we have something that represents all the different countries
Exactly
and all
right.
the different languages and what have you. And so the mayor and his delegation from Guatemala came last November. We were able to offer once again to the citizens of Charlottesville an opportunity to spend time with them, to meet them. They were really, really wonderful. We did have to get a lot of interpreters. That very few of them spoke sufficient English to carry on a conversation. Mm-hmm. You know, but they were actually absolutely charming. It's kind of interesting because 2 years ago, I went to Guatemala, I went to Huehuetenango, and this gentleman said to me, "Oh, I have this little podcast, and would you like to come on for a few minutes tonight?" So I said, okay. So I go, and we sit down just like this. Mm-hmm. And that's when I realized I was the only guest for 1 hour. Okay, I said, well, okay, let's go. And very, very wonderful conversations, and that was available all throughout through Latin America.
Wow.
And,
Was it in English or Spanish?
in Espanol. Sí.
So you speak Spanish too?
Sí.
Ah, muy bien.
But it was very interesting. I said, I don't want to listen to it because I don't want to crack my own Spanish. You never want to hear yourself doing something like that. You go like, okay.
That's my philosophy. I never actually go back and listen to the show. I'm like, no, I'm good.
But we hope to, within the coming year or so, organize a delegation to go to Guatemala. It's a small city. It's much smaller than Charlottesville. Guatemala is a country with problems. Its location, sitting there right there below Mexico. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, I just found that people are absolutely wonderful. I was received, actually in a manner that almost scared me because when I got there, I guess they had not had a lot of international visitors. So there were this colony of cars to transport me with a police escort. and when I went to open up a library. We opened after the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And I had taken gifts, some books and what have you from the Thomas Jefferson mansion. I thought that would be significant. And so we got there for the ceremony. As the police cars pulled up with me, and I got out to go inside, the mariachi band struck up singing with the music, and I was like, well, now I know what it feels like to be the president. But at the same time, that's a little bit intimidating. But now, we have 13 slots in the commission. One is empty right now, and I serve as the chairman of the commission and also as the person who's connected mostly with Huehuetenango. Mm-hmm. I have worked closely with Besançon, and I've enjoyed it much. I got involved myself because when I retired and moved to Charlottesville, I sat at home for about 10 years, and my wife said to me, "You have to go do something." Sitting at home, it's not easy. It's not easy, yep. And especially nowadays when you find that you can buy stuff while you're sitting there on the sofa. Mm-hmm. So you quietly go into bankruptcy while you're sitting there retired. So I began working with the school systems. So I taught languages at Charlottesville High School as well as in county. Last year I taught Spanish at Walton Middle School. 2 years ago I taught French and German at Charlottesville High School. And this year I'm sort of taking a step back from that. I don't like getting up in the morning anymore either. But that began the connection when I was working with the school system. That's how I got involved first with Best in Song in supporting a trip that was coming up with writing letters and talking with people, and then going on the trips myself to help accompany them, which I'll be doing in April coming up next year. And so I met people from the commission. Now, the process is fairly simple. When there's an opening, it's posted on the city website. There's a sister city page. There's also a page for boards and commission openings. Anyone can apply. And basically, we're looking for someone who has an interest in one of the cities, an interest in person-to-person involvement, community involvement, an interest in bringing the international focus to our citizens of Charlottesville, because everything we do is supposed to be for the benefit of the citizens of Charlottesville.
Okay.
We want them to. Now, Charlottesville is already a pretty international city. Like,
Yes,
you have to admit
absolutely,
that. It's pretty good. And with the university, who supports us tremendously, whenever we have visitors, we have activities,
They're able to bring them in, help
they
the
bring them in.
university.
For instance, Global Week is coming up in later this year, and we will participate in that. We participated in things like the Fountain Stay out at Monticello. So we try to get out there and be a part of the community. And we're looking forward to doing more things. We had, now one thing we have that a lot of people don't know about is a grants program where we put aside money for people to have an idea of what they can do individually to a project that will promote our mission, our objective. And one of them last year was a couple of professors for the university who had organized or arranged 4 or 5 pieces of music that represented the relationship between us and Best in Song, were composers from Best in Song that went back hundreds of years. And they organized a concert that they were going to perform in Best in Song.
With those?
Yes, they performed it here first. We were well attended. They performed it here when we had visitors from Best in Song, and then they went to Best in Song and they performed the concert there. The same, then we had, the projects are too numerous to mention, but they're usually, once again, small things to connect people. So we have to do a good job of telling people what's going on, to bring them into it.
To let them know
I
the
love
opportunities
Charlottesville, but
are.
Charlottesville is also a little bit of an apathetic city. It's like it takes a lot to move people to get them rallied up and interested.
Yep.
So you have to continually push out information, let them know what's going on.
Exactly.
So once again, as I was mentioning, we have 13 members of the commission, and the terms of 3 years. There's an application on the city website where one can apply. City residents are preferred, but you can be in a close area if you have a connection. I live in the county, but I work in at Charlottesville High School, so I have a close connection with the city.
Okay.
And then they serve a 3-year term. They can apply for a second 3-year term as a maximum. This is my final term, so next June I will rotate away from the commission after having served 6 years.
Yep.
Which is good because it's always good to bring in new ideas and new people. And so when I go to Best in Song in April, that'll be my last official.
Kind of farewell.
It'll be my farewell
tour.
tour. Yeah, I like that. I just need a train car, that old thing.
To wave under it.
Yes, exactly. But so we do have a position called the business rep. So we have, from different walks, a university rep, we have a higher education rep, that is, we have a Charlottesville City School rep who serves on the commission. We have ex officio from the city council who serves on the commission. And we have other ones who have different roles, city reps, individual city reps. And then we have one called the business rep. That one is actually vacant. So if anyone from a particular business or organization in the city were to be interested, they go to the website for the city, and there's an application for boards and commission for that particular position. And then it will go in front of the city council to be appointed. So that is available for anyone
Now,
who has an interest.
So, what are some of the things that someone on the commission would do if they join? What are kind of the
Especially on the business side.
on the
what is-
business
yeah.
website? Yeah.
Well, one of the things we'll do is the fact that we want to be able to improve our relationship with the local chamber of commerce. We want to be able to know how to reach out to businesses more. You know, if you don't work in a sales or retail or wholesale business, sometimes you don't totally understand what turns them on, what makes them function, how do you reach them? Because a lot of us come from other backgrounds. Now, I came from a business background. Before I retired, I ran a consulting company, and before that, I was an engineer. So for me I came from a background of 30 years in industry. And then when I started working in education, which was a whole new world for me, but very, very exciting. I get asked all the time is, people look at me and go like, "You're an old man, why are you in the school?" I say, some people are pretty straightforward. But I've only been doing this for 12 years. It would be a difference if I had been there for 30
Sure,
years.
exactly, yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
So, but we definitely would love to have someone who, from one of the business community, they want to join into the city. We meet once a month. They are public meetings because it's a commission. Everything we do is open to the public. And we look at the programs. For instance, we're in the process of putting together the type of programs we're going to be doing in the coming 12 months for outreach, to reach the public, some more concerts and tables we're going to put up, different activities we can participate in joining in. And so we've come up with a list for the coming year. Now we're into the implementation phase.
Yep.
And that's where you really need people, because we have to have people to man the booths. If we have a booth at a certain festival, we have to have someone standing there. The Pampers don't give themselves out, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Yep. You have to have someone there.
That's right, exactly.
That's right. And so, and the beautiful thing about it is, anyone who comes in, hopefully will have some new ideas of their own. Oh, I would think this would be a good idea. For instance, one of the things that I was interested in was the fact that perhaps one of the projects would be to have an artist compete to draw a mural in our sister city, and then have a reciprocal one, someone from there to come draw a mural on a wall here in Charlottesville. Those are the sort of things.
Absolutely. That's a good idea. Yeah.
We have signs up. We have cities that are streets that have been named for the sister cities, and we want to have that reciprocally located in the other cities. A lot of activities that are very, very interesting that, unfortunately, a large part of the population of Charlottesville don't know anything about. So that's the struggle. That's the continuous struggle, is to bring familiarity with the work we do to the city of Charlottesville, because, in my opinion, it's very, very valuable work. And we want people to get involved. We want people to enjoy it. We want the citizens of Charlottesville to profit from the commission.
Yes. Well, and you have to be involved in some way to profit, right? It's an opportunity, but if you never go to events or you never know about it, right, then you're not profiting as much by it as a citizen. So it's wonderful if you can get more people to participate. They can take advantage of the opportunity to get to know these other cities or if not, sometimes maybe you don't meet the people from there, but you can experience their culture and what their world is like.
That's a unique characteristic of the city of Charlottesville, is the fact that you go like, oh, they had this last week, I didn't know about it. Or they had this, went on 2 weeks ago.
After the fact,
After the fact. There's a lot of things that you realize after the fact. And so what we're trying to do is get ahead of that curve.
Yeah. I'm curious about one thing. So did you ever have any cities reach out to you and say, we'd like to be a sister city to the city of Charlottesville?
That has happened. Here's what's required, is how we got cities going. We need, first of all, a support group. We need to have a group of people who said, we have a connection with this particular city in this country, and we would like to have that to be a sister city. But now that requires them to basically have established themselves as a support group to be willing to stand up to be able to help make it happen. For instance, several years ago when we were looking for a Spanish city, there was a group here in the city called Ixtantan Foundation who builds orphanages and schools. They're building schools and orphanages in Guatemala. And they basically thought, well, it would be a good fit because we work closely with them. So they stood up as a community organization to help sponsor them. Dave Norris's Charlottesville Winneba Foundation is another support group which helps make that sister-city relationship happen.
Okay.
So initially, Charlottesville High School was the group that basically got us started with Best in Song.
Okay.
All right. So any city that we have or we want to have really comes from the citizens of Charlottesville. If there's a connection, there's a group who really feels strongly about a particular city or a particular country where we don't have a relationship and say, hey, we need to have a relationship with this city because we are from there or we know people from there or we like their culture, then they step forward and say, and there's a process. And there's a process for them to apply to submit certain documentation for consideration by the city council. And if the city council approves, then we begin the process. A city doesn't start off as a sister city initially. For instance, Tenango is still in the phase we call Friendship City. It's sort of like getting engaged and then,
Get married later.
There you go, right?
maybe. And so we're in that phase with them. But yes, we will go through a phase, could be up to several years, where we slowly begin to get to know each other. We have to determine if there's a fit. And it's the same as when you meet someone and you're in love and you get married. You've got to find out, are you compatible? Can you get along or what have you? And are you going to survive this whole this phase? And so we're in that phase with Wayward Tenango right now.
Okay.
They've been here. I've been there. We want to send a delegation there. The language barrier is a little bit of a problem, but that can be overcome.
Oh, absolutely.
Without a
Sure.
problem.
That's part of it, I suspect.
They're working hard to learn some English, and with a lot of people here working hard to learn Spanish.
Yeah.
There's a surprising amount of people in this area speak Spanish. And so we just want to be able to move this forward, but nicely and slowly. So yes, if a group of people, let's say, any city they would think of, if we had a group of people from an Asian city or an Asian country that felt, we have a giant population of people here, and we're willing to band together as a support group, then they have an opportunity to apply, to submit that paperwork, and perhaps when I look at the sister cities all over the United States, most cities, even smaller than Charlottesville, have 4, 5, 6, some have 8 or 9 sister cities, and have ongoing exchanges. Oftentimes the basis may be there's a university there that works closely with a university here, or it could be a social organization. It could be a sports activity. A variety of different reasons why people feel a connection.
Okay.
We've looked at cities in Argentina. We've looked at cities in Mexico, but we chose Wayward Tenango. I wasn't on the commission at the time that was chosen, but I think it's a great choice. But it requires getting to know them and them getting to know us. Finding that thing that reason for being connected, because that's not always apparent up front.
Yep.
So they are a sister city or still on the friendship?
They're still on the friendship
Okay,
side.
okay. And
They're
how long
friendship-
does it take? What would you say is the process that maybe you
long-
guys get married?
As long as it takes.
As long as it takes.
As long as it takes. There is no.
So there's no timetable.
There's no
It's just-
timetable. Not before 3 years.
Gotcha.
Now we do have that. You can't move up to the status of sister city before 3 years, but that doesn't mean that we have to move forward. We can decide, we can decide that the relationship as it is works, and we'll leave it there.
It's a friendship, yeah. Absolutely.
Yes, and
Do the commissioners vote on that? Who decides that? Is there like a vote or How does that work to become a
The
sister?
commissioners would only make a recommendation.
Okay.
That change would be
Okay.
approved by the city council.
Okay.
Okay, so the commission recommends.
And the
Yes.
city
City council
council
will decide.
will
Yes,
decide.
yes, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And so, because, we do represent the city government.
Sure.
So when I'm traveling, what have you, I'm working and speaking in the name of the mayor and the commissioners, of the city councilors. And they are quite actively involved whenever we've had visits here with our meetings, with our plans, for instance, our presentations. Mayor Wade has been involved before. Mayor Wade Snook was quite actively involved. So we've been very, very fortunate. Many, many years ago, Mayor Walker did a trip to both Ghana as well as to Bessonson. And we don't do too many, over a period of 10 years, there's only been 2 or 3 trips, usually for a very, very specific reason. For instance, on Mayor Wade's particular trip over there, the similarities between Bessonson and Charlottesville in terms of what we're trying to do are very important. Bessonson has given itself the mission to become a grain city, complete grain city, and that's part of the whole thing that Charlottesville aspires to. So they talked about the type of streetcars they use, the type of buses they use, the type of things they do with their buildings. A lot of different things that Mayor Wade was able to sit down with different people to learn about how they're doing things over here, because it is important. And I do know from having attended many different city council meetings that almost historically, when we're talking about new buses or we're talking about different things, people are all concerned. We want to get away from gasoline-powered buses. But that's just one of the many things that have to do with becoming a green city. Also, the fact that we are becoming a central for biotech and startups. Bessonson is also. So Bessonson is with the universities there, and we have relationships between our university here and a university there. So Mayor Wade's trip, once again, he was invited because of the 80th anniversary or commemoration of the liberation of Bessonson, and but he took advantage of that to work on issues that are very, very important to the future of Charlottesville.
That's wonderful. That's
Wow.
fantastic. And then we definitely have a couple people liking. Amy Leiter liking the show this morning. I think we have a comment. Dolores Clark Herring says it's wonderful to hear how Charlottesville is connected to other places in the world.
It's so
Sister
nice for
City.
my wife to say that.
Well, she is watching. She is watching. Thanks so much for watching, Dolores.
Number one
We
fan.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I have one fan.
No, you're
No,
number
that's
one.
the
fan.
number
Number
one
one
fan.
fan.
So
You have
one.
many fans. You have many fans. Elizabeth Erpy is tuning in this morning. So you have many fans. She's just number one. Dolores is your top fan, to be sure. Well, Edward, this has been fantastic. If people want to learn more, where should they go to find out more about the sister cities?
There are 3 quick answers to that. One is the Charlottesville.gov website. You can just go there and search Sister City. All the information there about our cities, about the processes we go through when we meet, minutes from our previous meeting, as well as applications. Then there's a link also to CVillesisterCities.org, which is our own website, where we talk about more charity events. But most up to date would be Instagram, and the one that I keep up to date myself is the Seaville Sister Cities Facebook page.
Okay.
And where you'll see most of the pictures of most all activities being posted there. As a matter of fact, I'm sure people are watching us through the Facebook page.
Yep.
Hopefully. So those are the 3 things that people can do to get in contact with us. And my name is Edward Herring, and people can always find me at Herring at charlottesville.gov.
Oh,
Okay.
perfect.
So thank you.
Super
Wonderful.
Thank you for having me here today.
Well,
It's been
thank you,
an
Edward.
absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for
I've
coming
learned
on.
so much. I
I've learned
appreciate
a lot,
it.
and
Yes.
I'm really appreciative of what you do and
Yeah.
what the work of the commission.
Thank you. Thank
you.
you.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So absolutely, yeah. So Charlottesville Sister Cities Commission Facebook page. You can see, yep, we're on there. The events are on there. You can see Mayor Wade's visit pictures on there. So you can check that out. And lots of ways to keep connected and keep up to date.
It's
Like
funny.
Edward said, I mean, don't be that person in Charlottesville who says afterwards,
Oh,
I
had
didn't know
that
that was
last-
happening. I missed that. Be the person who knows in advance that it's happening and says, I'm going to go to that.
Exactly. It's, it's just amazing because, like I said, I've heard of that program, the Sister City, and it never occurred to me. First of all, I didn't know how it worked, and it never occurred to me, which were the cities for Charlottesville. Even though you said it's somewhere on the road, it's there. It's one of those things. I probably drive by there, not really paying attention.
And
to
didn't
it.
realize it. Yeah, I didn't realize it, and just how much and what connections there are there.
Exactly.
Which is fantastic.
Some have been there for
I
years.
didn't realize how long some had been connected to us, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So there you have it. Charlottesville Sister Cities Commission. Be sure to check it out on
And
Facebook.
Friendship City.
And Friendship City.
Which again, I didn't know how that worked.
Well, that one has a fantastic name. So Huehue Tenango, does it start like, H-U-E? It's like one of those like
Huehue
classic,
Tenango, yeah.
like, you wonder, like, it may be a small city, but you wonder how long it's been around
Yeah, exactly.
in Guatemala.
In Guatemala.
So that must be pretty neat.
Yeah.
And so now we got our finance topic, also known as, and Xavier, what is going on?
What are you going on there?
Topic.
Well, I mean, I guess the important thing is, as most people already know, the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates by 50 basis points, right? Mm-hmm. And so, there's been quite a lot of chat about, why 50? What does that mean? Why did they do 50? Why didn't they do 25, right? Mm-hmm. And where are we on that cycle of the Fed continuing to lower rates?
Do you think there's anything to read into the 50 as opposed to 25? Or
so yes, I mean there's the possibility, right? But I'll be honest with you, I come from a different camp a little bit on that, and maybe because I've lived through kind of longer time period, and therefore I've seen interest rates really, really high. I've seen interest rates really, really low, and so for me, 5% interest rates is not what I would call a death interest rate where, financing can't be done, right?
Yes.
And the economy can't grow at 5%, right? I don't see it that way, right? So my question is, why are we doing 50 basis points off the bat? So in other words, if you felt the way you do, why didn't you do 25 last time?
25 and 25.
And then do 25, right? And see where that gets you. And I think that will be much more plausible for everybody. They did 50, but I mean, you have to look at what happened in the marketplace. You did 50 basis points, and here's what's really interesting, right? The stock market went up, has gone up since then, and the bond market's gone down, right? So you sit there and go, wait a minute, so they lowered interest rates, which is supposed to be good for bonds, and yet bond market goes up, and the interest rate goes up, prices go down, so it's gone.
Which is the opposite of the direction they went. So
Exactly.
they lowered the short-term rate, and then...
That's right, and the stock market went up, right?
Yeah.
So the stock market's sitting there saying, all right, cheaper financing is good, right? Obviously, they didn't see a situation where they felt that the economy is hugely at risk, and therefore the Fed is saying, oh, my Lord, the economy is really, really struggling. I got to do 50. They didn't perceive it that way, right? And for good reason, because, one of the things that we are learning about the economic numbers we're seeing is that those economic numbers are historical numbers. And the statistics that we were using in the past, pre-COVID, are really struggling to prove anything post-COVID, right? So you sit there and go, oh, look, this number indicates in the past, 90% of the time meant we were going into a recession or this was going to happen, and it's not happening, right? So there's reasons behind that. And I think every economist and people that look at data are starting to sit back and say, wait a minute, I think the statistic we were using in the past is no longer valid here. So we need to figure out.
It's no longer a leading indicator. It's not
exactly.
telling us
That's right. Leading indicator. That's a perfect
in other words,
word.
It's no longer telling us what's going to happen with the kind of certainty that you would need.
That's right. Exactly. And so I think that's part of it. I think that the markets are looking and saying these indicators aren't as predictive as they used to be, right? And I think and there's a number of reasons for that, right? And I won't get into all of them, but on the fixed income side, the challenge you have, which people don't understand, and especially on the mortgage side, is that the fixed income market from January to like 2 weeks ago, interest rates already came down. I mean, the 10-year already was down about 60, 70 basis points. The 30-year was down 60 or 70 basis points. So basically, the 50 basis points that the Fed cut was already baked into long-term rates. So now they cut it and they say, okay, so where are we? What is going on? And do we really expect? So here's kind of the.
If I may, I think what people need to realize is that the Federal Reserve controls the discount rate.
Yes.
There is one particular, when you hear the Federal Reserve lowering the interest rate, there's a few tools that they have, but they do not control all the interest rates in the market. The bond market is a market, and just like if you were to go to a market, you buying and selling stuff, and then you end up with a price for something, right? In other words, if you've got 5 people selling tamales, and then 5 more people come in and start selling tamales, the price might go down because there's a buy and sell that determines the price of the tamale. And the same thing happens in the bond market. There is a buy and sell that determines the price, being the interest rate of bonds. The Fed doesn't control every single interest rate on every single bond. So the bond market gets information the same way we do. So if you hear for 6 months, the Fed, they might cut rates by 50 basis points. Well, the bond market starts moving in that direction, because if you knew that the tamale guy down the street is going to cut his tamale by $2 in a week, and you're selling tamales, what are you going to do?
Right.
You're going to cut yours by $2 today. So,
Exactly.
So you react. So it's not like everybody woke up. It's not like the bond market woke up that Wednesday and said, oh my goodness, they're cutting rates by 50%. The fact that everyone was talking about it means that they are reacting. So that's kind of what happens there.
That's right, exactly. And you also have to think about the fact that the long-term interest rates are also very connected to the inflation rate. So as inflation rates became to come down, right, long-term rates became to come down, right? And so that's what happened throughout the first half of the year. Now, one of the things that most people are talking about is if the Fed continues to cut short-term interest rates, the discount rate, obviously when the Fed cuts short-term interest rate, the discount rate, it lowers the 3-month Treasury bill. So any short-term bond, immediately there's immediate impact, right? So what they call the yield curve, meaning that from the 3-month Treasury bill all the way to the 30-year, that curve begins to what we call normalize. Normalize means that short-term interest rates should be lower than longer-term rates because it's a shorter term.
It's less risky to lend
less
someone.
risky to lend somebody for 3 months than it is for 30 years, right? Because in 30 years, there's a lot that can happen, and he may not pay you back. And it's like, I took a risk. So therefore, I need to charge him more in order to make sure that I'm willing to take that risk to lending for 30 years. The curve has been inverted for a very long period of time, and there's another catch. Typically, the curve inverts, meaning there's going to be a recession. And that inversion lasts no more than 3 or 4 weeks, right? We've had it for over a year, right? And we haven't seen
By
a recession.
inversion, that means short-term interest rates are higher than long-term interest rates.
Exactly.
Which in theory should not be the case.
Correct, exactly. So if we begin to see a curve that quote-unquote normalizes, that means becomes normal in the sense of how curves should be, short-term rates are lower than the longer-term rates, right? There's a typical spread between, yield spread, basis point spread, whatever you want to call it, between short-term rates and like the 10-year, the 30-year, right? And that spread, right, is typically like between, let's say, the 2-year or even sometimes the 3-month T-bill to like the 10 years is about 100 basis points. So if the Fed really does what it wants to do, which is lower rates to about 3.5% to 3.25%, and you add 1% to that, which is 100 basis points, that means that the 10 years should be trading at 4 3/4, 4.5. Well, the 10 years trading at 3.7%. So going forward, when you look at it, say, there's a good probability that short-term rates, right? I mean, long-term rates may begin to inch up as opposed to continue to come down, right? So there's a situation where you say, all right, mortgage rates should be coming down because the Fed lowers rates. Well, no, the mortgage rate is based off the 10-year.
Think about a mortgage is a long-term. It's either a 15-year mortgage or a 30-year
30-year,
mortgage,
right?
right?
Yeah.
But it's saying no matter what mortgage it is, it's a long-term.
That's correct. But
Debt.
they
But
usually
the bank
trade.
is lending you money, and they're being paid back over a long period of time, not in 2 years.
That's correct. Yes. Yeah. And the average, they call the average life of a 30-year mortgage is 10 years, right? Because you're paying back principal, right? And so the 10-year is the key number to look at when you look at mortgage rates most of the time. So of course, if the Fed cuts by 50, but the 10-year begins to move off in rate, you're not going to see mortgage rates come down. And if they've already come down, I mean, remember, rates were close to 8% at
Exactly.
one point.
The fact that
and
they're
now
6.5.
they're now like 6.25, I think is the last
Yeah.
time, right? So they've come down already. Now, just because the Fed cuts 50 basis points, you're not going to see from 6.25 all the way to 5.75. It's just not going to happen, right? You know, and like I said,
Is the
the
potential you
10-year,
even see the opposite.
the 10-year has been going up in rates, so there's a good chance that, you know, mortgage rates may begin to rise sometime in the near future, right? Although yield spreads have been very wide on the mortgage market, so that's a different story. So, you know, my feeling is that, you know, one of the areas that concern me, right, is the inflation part, right? I mean, everybody seems to be extremely happy that inflation is down to, you know, 3 to 3.5%. Well, the Fed really's target is 2%. And the Fed's target should be 0% because why should we have inflation in the
I know,
first
we've
place?
always had
right?
an issue
Yeah.
as
I mean,
why you
why are we happy
intentionally-
about inflation?
Yeah.
There should be no reason to have inflation, period, right? But we're at 3.5%. Well, of course, we came down from 9% to 7% to 3.5%. Everything looks rosy, right? But the answer is no. 3.5% is an enormous impact on your daily purchases of, especially food, rent, etc.
Especially because you got to remember that this is 3.5 compounded on
Your
what
9
you've
and your
already
7.
seen. In other words, 4 years ago you were paying $100 for something. 4 years later you're paying $125. I think you went add it all together, but 25%. You're paying $125 for something. If I tell you, well, now things are great because next year you're only going to pay $128. You're like, well,
That's 3% of 120 that's going up.
Yeah, but
It's
I'm
not
saying,
3%,
I know,
exactly.
I'm trying to make it simple, right? And at let's say it was $5, that 3%, right? In other words, you're not really helping me that much. I'm sitting there saying, well, wait a second, 4 years ago I paid 100, now I'm up to 125, but you're telling me everything's rosy because next year I'm only going to pay 130.
Yeah.
Instead of 150.
Exactly.
And so, well, that's still more than 100. In other words, if I'm struggling to make ends meet, that 3.5% number may be better than 9, but it's not exactly it's not a number that's improving my situation.
Yeah.
It's a number that's saying, well, your situation won't get as much worse as you thought.
Yeah. So my viewpoint is, I think we're kind of stuck with inflation between 3 and 3.5%, right? Going forward, right? Because and let's be honest, you take a look at both the both people that are running for president, right? Their economic programs are both inflationary. I mean, one in one way, one in the other way. So really, we're not really solving. And by bringing back manufacturing to this country is fantastic, but it's also inflationary, right? So you have to think about that. And the sense is, if you're going to continue to have an inflation of 3 and 3.5%, then there's no way the Fed's going to cut rates all the way down to 3.75% to 3.5%, unless there's something on the other side.
Yep.
And the only other side is, the economy's really going to struggle, right? So either they're perceiving that the economy is going to struggle sometime in the 6 to 12 months, right? Which won't bode well necessarily for the stock market, because eventually, we had 2 very strong years in the stock market. Stock markets don't go up 20% every single year forever. Sooner or later, you get a correction in there somewhere, right? So my viewpoint is that 50, I would have done 25 and then 25. I would have maybe done 25 a little earlier and just see how the economy recuperates and how the markets react to that. But listen, they know more than I do. They see more than I do, so I'm sure there's a reason for the 50.
No is debatable.
Well, I guess I sit back and say, from a perspective of kind of portfolio construction, on the fixed income side, there's an enormous amount of work to be done because things are changing. At this point,
We've been in a 2-year cycle of interest rates going up, which means that would lend you to certain parts of the bond market, namely places where as interest rates go up, your coupon goes up, right, which is the floating rate sector. But now you don't want to be in a floating rate sector if rates go down.
Exactly.
At least not to the degree that you were in the past 2 years.
Yeah.
So just like we saw a big shift in 2022, you're going to have to make some changes in 2024.
Yeah. And the shape of the yield curve, right? That's very important because depending on how that shape shifts, right, you can make investment decisions to obviously, appreciate your portfolio through that. And on the stock side, Again, a good diversified portfolio is very important. If rates come down, then you would hope, and you've seen that a little bit lately. You would hope that small cap stocks begin to do better because they have been really doing lousy for the last 3 years.
Well, to the reason for that, right? So small cap stocks are smaller companies. If you imagine, let's say you as your small business owner went out to the market to borrow money, what is a bank going to charge you? You're looking at 10%.
Right.
10 plus, right? If you're Apple and you go to borrow money, they lend it to you 3%. In other words, you're not paying the same high premium that a small company is. So high interest rates hurt smaller companies a lot more than they do larger companies.
Correct.
So now you see the reversal of that. Smaller companies may actually be able to borrow to do projects again, where perhaps they were not doing that the last couple of years, because if you have to borrow at 12%.
Well, projects even survive. I mean,
Exactly.
Sometimes it's like, especially think of biotech companies, it takes them a very long time to get approval, all right? So it's like they got to last 5, 6, 7 years, and something that funding just goes away. So if you can borrow at cheaper rates, you may be able to survive and finally come up with a product that, like, wow, this is a life-saving product. Boom, that company
But
goes
if
through
you're
the roof.
paying 9%, you may not make it.
Exactly. So, from one side, it's like everything else, there's pros and cons. On one side of the market, on one side, people say low rates, that's great because I can borrow lower rates. But if you're if you're a senior citizen on fixed income, right, it's like, you were enjoying being able to earn 5, 6, 7, 8% in a very safe portfolio. As rates come down, now you have to say to yourself, if I need 5, 6, 7%, how do I do it? And sometimes the problem is the only way to do it is then to go into the stock market, high dividend paying stocks. But again, is that what you want, right? You don't want to have to take that kind of risk.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think people, they look back and see the lower rates that we had in the 2010s. And yes, if you were a borrower, that was great. If you got your mortgage at 2 3/4, you were loving it. That wasn't even the 2010s. That was 2020.
That's what I try to tell people too. It's like, some people got extremely lucky, 2 3/4, 3%,
Some people
3
got
3/4.
3,
and that
4.
was really right, like during that COVID era, right?
What I'm saying is, in other words, in the 2010s, if you were a borrower, maybe you liked some of the rates you were getting back then. But if you were a saver, I mean, we were there investing for people in the 2010s. If you needed income, you had no choice but to go into the stock market. I mean, when rates were extremely low in the 2010s and people needed 3, 4%, you had to go into the stock market to get some dividends, or else you were going into high yield bonds.
Dividends, some growth, and or you had to go into riskier assets, even in fixed income, in order to achieve
In other words, you couldn't buy treasuries and get the 4 to 5% that you needed as a senior citizen of income out of your portfolio. For the past few years, you've been able to do that.
Yeah.
Right? So the way these things shift, it's not necessarily better for everybody that rates are coming down. There's going to be a subset of people who are like, man, I have to take more risk to get the same income generation that I was getting beforehand.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. I mean, obviously, if you're purchasing a home, right?
Then you want the lower.
And even though that, the real estate market's a whole different market by itself also. But if you're purchasing a home and rates are coming down, you sit there and go, wow, maybe now I can afford that particular home.
Exactly.
As to whether that house goes
Went
up in
and
price,
down, All
it's
else
a different
equal,
story. But all else
stays
equal,
the same.
you say to yourself, wow, I can now buy that home. I can afford it.
Yeah.
So that is helpful. But there's always the other side. It's like, somebody else who's living off their savings, they're sitting there and going, wow, I literally need to pull my principal and
or take more risk.
Or take more risk. Yeah.
So there's a pro and con to everything.
But I'd be interested to see. I mean, I think most economists now expect them to continue to cut rates a little bit in here, and so I'm going to sit back.
We'll
and wait
see
and
whether this was a one and done or if they.
Yeah.
They
I think they will, but I'm not. Again, I'm not in the camp that they should. But
I've long been of the opinion that you look at the history of interest rate movement from the Federal Reserve, and it takes 9 months to a year for the economy really to, I think, see the impact of an interest rate change.
Yeah.
Because that needs to trickle through the market. It's not an immediate thing to see the impact. So I always wonder why they do a bunch in a row, because I don't know. I feel like the track record is not stupendous
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah, I mean, I always say, I mean, to me, the economy is like a big barge, right? It's very hard to move any direction
correct.
or make it stop, right? It takes a long time, right? It's not a speedboat where you can turn it really quickly. And you're absolutely right. You move little by little, but you know, it might take 6-8 months, and before that, it's like, we went too far, and now we have to suffer the consequences.
That's why I'm a little dubious on the no. I said, for sure, I think the Federal Reserve thinks they know more than Xavier. Whether they actually do remains to be seen.
Well, yeah, no.
That's always whether they actually know more than the economy itself.
Well, I
remains
think
to
part
be
of it
seen.
is, listen, they have a lot more data than I have, and maybe sometimes having too much data is not necessarily good. You know, because let's be honest, sometimes the more you read and more data you have, the more confused you become. It's like, wait a minute, you got 50% people saying this and they show me the data, 50% people saying this and show me the data, so which one am I to believe, right?
Exactly.
You know, sometimes you got to take a step back and say, you know, let me just think about this for a while and not just look at that and say, yeah, here's where it's going.
Here's where it's going.
Yeah.
But we'll find out.
Yeah, we will.
We'll find out. But,
It's what makes our life interesting.
Exactly. That's why we're able to have a finance topic. Otherwise, we'd sit here and say, it's all good. All right. See you next week.
Yeah.
But thanks for that. Thanks
You're
for,
welcome.
thanks for
Always fun chatting with you.
Same here. Same here. Thank you, Rosalia de Rosalia Tordaro. I've been watching from Miami.
Wow, Miami.
You know, hopefully it is
Hopefully,
nicer weather in Miami.
well, yeah, I
than
think
it
so. I
is
think the
here.
storm
I think
was
Miami's on
not-
the other side, thankfully,
Yeah,
of the storm.
yeah.
So for all we know, she's
They could
got
be
like
having, like,
beautiful
nice sunny weather.
Sunny weather,
Yeah.
and have
No
have
issue.
no clue that there's a
A
hurricane.
hurricane.
Who knows?
The other side.
You know, but we hopefully they're enjoying it. So, but thank you for tuning in and taking some time out of the Miami weather to join us. But thanks to everyone who tuned in today. It was wonderful. Thanks to Edward for coming on and teaching
Yeah.
us a little bit about the sister cities in Charlottesville. Thank you all for tuning in and joining us this morning. Next week, we're going to have on Liz Nobby from Alight Flowers, as well as Matthias from Matthias Young. We're going to be coming
okay.
on. Maybe we'll talk a little, I know next week, it'll be October.
Oktoberfest,
So we might be able
Oktoberfest.
to do some Oktoberfest. We'll see what Matthias has in store for us.
Yeah,
so be sure
that'd be
to
interesting.
come check that out. Thanks to you for
Well, no, thank you
joining
for-
me on
and
the
welcome
show
back.
today.
Always fun.
It's always a pleasure, always a pleasure. Thanks to Emergent Financial Services for presenting, and our fantastic partners at Charlottesville Opera, Matthias Young Realty Credit, Sirius Insurance, Forward Adelante. Thank you all for tuning in. Do your best to stay dry this weekend. I know it will be a challenge, but hopefully by the time we see you next week, we will have dry and maybe some beautiful fall weather. But until that
That'd be
time, as we like to close it out on the show, hasta mañana.